There are things we say with great confidence when we are young. Things we say before life has had the chance to show us how little we actually know about ourselves. Kasyoka had one of those things. She had said it in churches back home in Kenya. She had said it with a laugh and a shake of her head. She had said it so many times, so comfortably, that it had become a kind of personal truth. I could never marry a pastor. She meant it, she really truly meant it, but God has a particular sense of humor about the things we say with great confidence, and sometimes, in His gentle, unhurried way, He allows life to quietly rearrange everything we thought we had settled. This is the story of how Kasyoka discovered that the life she had always said she wasn't strong enough for was the very life she had been made for all along. Kasyoka had always joked about it. Whenever conversations about marriage came up at church back home in Kenya, someone would eventually mention pastors' wives, and Kasyoka would laugh and shake her head. "Me?" she would say. No, I could never be a pastor's wife." It wasn't that she didn't respect the role. Quite the opposite. She respected it so much that she felt unqualified for it. Pastors' wives, in her mind, were extraordinary women. Women who prayed constantly. Women who had endless patience. Women who carried the emotional weight of an entire congregation. Kasyoka loved the Lord deeply, but she never imagined herself living that kind of life. By the time she turned 29, however, life took her somewhere she had never expected. Japan. For years, Kasyoka had quietly fallen in love with the country through the J-dramas she watched late at night. The culture fascinated her. The quiet streets. The respectful way people interacted. The beauty of cherry blossom season. Sometimes she would watch those shows and think, what would it feel like to live there? Eventually, curiosity turned into determination. Reapplied for work opportunities. And 1 year later, she stepped off a plane in Tokyo. The first few months were exciting but lonely. Everything felt unfamiliar. The language, the food, even the silence of Japanese neighborhoods felt different from the lively energy she had grown up with. But one thing remained constant in her life: her faith. So one Sunday morning, she searched online and found a small international church. That church changed everything. It was there she met Pastor Kento. Most people in the congregation simply called him Pastor K. He was 35 years old and led the international church with a quiet gentleness that surprised many newcomers. Kento was not loud. He was not dramatic. But when he spoke about faith, people listened, because his words carried sincerity. The first time Kasyoka saw him, she noticed something immediately. He seemed kind, not just polite, not just professional, but genuinely kind. After the service, members gathered for tea and conversation. Kento walked around greeting everyone personally. When he reached Kasyoka, he smiled warmly. "You're new here," he said. "Yes," she replied. "My name is Kasyoka." "Kento," he said, then he laughed slightly. "But most people here just call me Pastor K." Kasyoka smiled. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Pastor K." From that day forward, Kasyoka began attending church regularly, and over time, she became deeply involved in the community. She joined the volunteer team. She helped with international fellowship events. Sometimes, she even assisted new visitors who were adjusting to life in Japan, just as she once had. And gradually, without either noticing, their friendship grew stronger. They often worked together during church events. Sometimes they stayed behind after services discussing faith, culture, and life in Japan. Kasyoka admired how deeply he cared about people. Kento admired her warmth and sincerity. But Kasyoka never once considered the possibility that their relationship might become romantic, because, after all, she had always said she would never marry a pastor. But God had other plans. One evening during cherry blossom season, the church organized a small gathering in a park. Soft pink petals drifted through the air like falling snow. Members of the congregation laughed and shared food under the trees. Kasyoka stood nearby, watching the petals fall. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" a voice said beside her. She turned. It was Kento. "Yes," she said softly, "they really are." For a moment they stood quietly together. Then Kento spoke again. "Kasyoka, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" Kento hesitated slightly. Then he smiled. "Would you like to have dinner with me sometime?" Kasyoka blinked. For a moment, she didn't know what to say, because suddenly she realized something surprising. The man she admired, the man she respected, the man she had grown close to, was the one person she had always said she would never marry, a pastor. But as cherry blossom petals drifted around them, Kasyoka felt something unexpected: peace. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, God knew her future better than she did. And perhaps the life she once said she wasn't strong enough for was exactly the life she had been prepared for all along. After Kento asked her to dinner beneath the cherry blossoms, Kasyoka went home that evening feeling strangely nervous. Not because she didn't like him, but because she did. Very much. And that frightened her. "Lord," she prayed that night, "you know I always said I could never marry a pastor." She paused. "But if this is from you, help me see it clearly." Their first date happened a week later at a small ramen restaurant near the church. Nothing extravagant. Just two people sitting across from each other, discovering how easily conversation flowed between them. They talked about faith, about Japan, about the challenges of leading an international church. Kasyoka listened carefully, and slowly she realized something. Pastor Kento didn't expect perfection. He simply wanted a partner who loved God and loved people. Over the following months, their friendship deepened into something neither could deny. They prayed together, served the church together, and slowly fell in love. One evening after a church event, Kento walked Kasyoka to the train station. He stopped near the entrance. "Kasyoka," he said quietly. "Yes? Think God brought you here for more than just a job in Japan?" Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Kento smiled softly. "I think he brought you here for me." A year later, they were married in a small ceremony attended by members of their church. And Kasyoka discovered something surprising. Being a pastor's wife wasn't about perfection. It was about compassion, listening, praying, encouraging others. And over time, she grew beautifully into the role she once believed she could never carry. Together, she and Kento built not just a church, but a family. And Kasyoka would sometimes laugh when she remembered the words she used to say back in Kenya. "I could never marry a pastor," because now she knew something she hadn't understood then. Sometimes the life you think you could never live is exactly the one God prepared you for. A year after that evening under the cherry blossoms, Kasyoka stood at the front of the small international church in Japan, wearing white, holding flowers, looking at the man she had once said she would never marry. And she laughed, not nervously, not uncertainly, but with the full, warm, unbothered laughter of a woman who has finally understood the joke. God had known all along. She was the one who had needed time to catch up. The wedding was small, simple, exactly right. And when Pastor Kento took her hands at the altar and looked at her, quietly, steadily, the way he looked at everything that mattered, Kasyoka felt something settle in her chest that had never settled quite like that before. This was where she was supposed to be. This was who she was supposed to become. But standing there in the warmth of that moment, Kasyoka did not yet know what was coming. She did not know about the congregation member who would weep in a prayer room, or the building that would suddenly be taken away, or the midnight she would find her husband asleep at his laptop again, or the 2 pink lines on a small white stick that would change everything. She did not yet know any of it. She only knew this: she had said yes. And God was only just beginning. Kasyoka once laughed at the idea of being a pastor's wife, and then God, in his gentle and faithful way, showed her that the life she feared was the life she was made for. If you've ever said never to God about something, this story was for you. Subscribe to Written by Grace, Faith, and Forever Stories. Share this with someone whose never might actually be a not yet. And come back for part 2 because Kasyoka and Kento's story is just getting started.